Great, this is our last video. So Unit 6, we're on the back of your chart. So we're going to look at midpoint and partitioning segments. So midpoint is just the point in the exact middle of the segment. We learned later in geometry that a midpoint bisects, where bisect means to cut in half. So all you have to do to find the midpoint is to average the two endpoints together. So when we average something together, we add the numbers together and then divide by however many numbers we have. And since we're talking about two endpoints, we have two x's, so we're going to add those together and divide by 2, and then add the y's together and divide by 2. It's easy to get midpoint and distance formula confused, but on midpoint, just remember you're doing the average, and when you do the average, you add. So on number 9, the coordinates of the midpoint is what we're looking for. We know that the endpoints are -4, 4, and 6, 9. So what we're going to do for M is we're going to add these together. If we add the x's together, we get 2. Divide by 2, we get 1. Here we're going to add these two together, we get 13. Divide that by 2, and we get 6.5. So the midpoint between these 2 points is the point 1, 6.5. All right, number 10, we're going to go backwards. So this time we're given the midpoint and one of the endpoints, we're trying to find the other. So since we're going backwards, we need to do our steps backwards, and we do steps backwards in math, we also do the opposite. So the first thing that we're going to do is, instead of dividing by 2, I'm going to multiply by 2. So if I multiply this by 2, I get 0. And then instead of adding the endpoints, I'm going to subtract the endpoints. So I'm going to multiply by 2, subtract the endpoint, and I get -3. Here I'm going to multiply this by 2, which is 10, subtract the endpoint, and I get 10. Now, if you're not sure, then just double check. If I average these two together, I'm going to add them together, divide by 2, I get 0. If I add these together, divide by 2, I get 5. So just remember that when you're doing the midpoint backwards, you're going to do the steps backwards and also the opposite or inverse operation. Okay, partitioning segments. What you're doing on this is you're finding a point that is a fraction of the way. It's not midpoint. Midpoint is halfway. So this might be 2/3 of the way. It might be in the ratio of 3 to 5. But what we did was we took that fraction that we created from the ratio. We found how far it was between B and A, and then multiplied that together, and then we always add it back to the A. But you have to do it once for the x's and then again for the y's. So we want to do B minus A, multiply that by the fraction, and then add it back to A. And then do the same thing with the y's. So B minus A, multiply that by the fraction, and then add it back to A. So a few things before we do this example. If the ratio was 3 to 1, then our fraction that we're going to use is 3/4. Because if I need a 3 to 1 ratio, that means I need 4 pieces. That is a total of 4 pieces. And starting from A, I need 3. If the ratio was 1 to 5, then the fraction would be 1/6. Because this right here tells me I need 6 pieces, and the first section is 1 piece long. All right, now, if it told you to find something that was 2/3 of the way, then you use 2/3. The only time that we change our number is if it's given to us as in a ratio form. If they've given us a fraction and they said 2/3 of the way, then we just use 2/3. All right, so going on to number 11, last one. Given these 2 points, find the coordinates of the point P on this segment that partitions AB in the ratio of 2 to 3. So what that means is that the magic fraction that we're going to use is 2/5. So what I need to do is do the x's first. All right, so 2/5 is the fraction. I'm going to do b minus a, but remember I'm doing the x's, so I need to do 5 minus -3. So that gives me 8. And then 2/5 of 8. So if we put this over 1, that would be 16/5. 16/5 is 3 1/5. And if I add that back to a, which is -3, then x is 1/5. So I know that these two, or 2/5 of the way between these 2 points is when x is 1/5. So far I know that point P is going to be 1/5 something. All right, now we're going to go and do the same thing with the y's. So I know the fraction is 2/5. Now I need to do b minus a using the y's. So b minus a is going to be 4, which we can write as 4 over 1. So that would equal 8/5. 8/5 would be 1 3/5. And now I'm going to add that back to point A. So this is where some of you guys had some trouble when we were in the unit. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. When we were in the unit working on this, because what was happening, let's focus there, was you would say -4, take 1 away, that's -3, and then put 3/5 back on. But what you want to think about is that you had maybe 4 pizzas, and 1 3/5 of them are gone, which means that 2 2/5 of them still remain, and sign of the larger, so it's -2 2/5. All right, that takes care of all of Unit 6. Congratulations on finishing your review, and best of luck to you on Wednesday.